I was like, all right, Dad, you're the man. You make the decisions. You tell us what you want to do. Now, you got one of two choices, as you have told us growing up. You're going to get through this and we're going to go through it. And it's going to be a long healing process as long as you know you're coming back to 100% you. Or you go dance with the man. Because it's not our choice. And about 3 hours later, he decided that he wanted to go dance with the man.
Welcome to Fatherhood Voices, breaking the toxic cycle. Dive in as real dads bear all, the mess-ups, make-ups, and every heartfelt moment in between. It's raw, it's real, and it might just change the way you see family.
Welcome to another edition of Fatherhood Voices, where we're looking to break the toxic cycle between fathers and their children. So we're doing something a little bit different this month. We're bringing on a lot of children to share their stories of how their fathers showed up or didn't show up. And I'm excited to have Kristi Berryhill here today. And she has a guest. Coco is...
Now we have Coco here. She's hanging
awesome.
out.
So Coco's going to be making an appearance too. I don't think he's going to share much about his trauma and his separation and abandonment issues with his parents. But we are going to dive into Kristi's story, and she's going to share a little bit about herself. And then we're just going to dive into early childhood and just what your relationship was like with your father. So I'll go and turn it over to you, Kristi.
Awesome. Well, I just want to say thank you so much for having me and having such an amazing podcast that really enlightens, men to step up and be a parent. And I definitely think that I have an incredibly unique story, which I think everyone has their own journey and their own superhero story that they all own. And I love to share mine. I would definitely say that I come from, a very powerful mother, and my dad came along later. And I had a biological father that, was a bad man. He was a terrible, terrible person. I'm going to go into some really deep things. A lot of people might get a little uncomfortable with this conversation, but it's honesty, and I have no shame in my game whatsoever. I feel like I've been through these challenges in life to put me at where I am today. So if it does get a little wild. So my biological father was, like I said, a very bad man. He molested me for a really long time when I was a baby. And when my mom found out, she immediately took control. And I was so blessed because I went to my mom at a young age and told my mom I didn't want to go with my biological father after they had divorced. And she believed me. She just had this feeling of like, okay, why? And I would never tell her. I was so afraid to tell her because I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure what the consequences were going to be, and I didn't want to cause chaos. I was young. I was only 4 or 5 years old. Not understanding, what's wrong and right at that time. But I just didn't like it. And so finally on Thanksgiving Day, I pulled my mom aside and I said, I don't want to go. And she's like, tell me why. And I said, because I don't like the way he makes me feel. And immediately right then and there, I told her what was going on, and she believed me. She believed everything that I said. She immediately, grabbed me and was like, it's okay. You don't have to go. And it started into the court case. My mom filed charges. My mom took it all the way to the point where if they were going to grant my biological father any type of custody and or visitation, unsupervised visitation rights, that we were going to go underground.
Wow.
And we were going to change my last name. She was getting passports, she was doing whatever she could to protect me and get me out of the country. So luckily the judge ruled it that he was a very bad man. And that kind of started the journey of my hero story. And I overcame that quite a bit. I was in and out of therapy, and my mom, again, I'm the only child. So my mom really, really took control of being such an incredible mother and standing what was right for her daughter. And so she did all the proper things that you could do for your kid, is get them therapy, let them talk, let them communicate, let them share their story if they want, and never to be afraid of your voice. And so my mom is like, the hierarchy, right? So, she's my creator. She's the one. Well, then, a
Let
couple
me let
years
me ask you let me ask you a question, because there's a powerful teaching moment there.
yeah.
Because you said that you were afraid to share that with your mother, so it went on for a period of time. And
Mhm.
there's a lot of unfortunately, when this happens, when fathers um, inflict this trauma on their children, a lot of times the mothers don't have that voice. And it's fortunate that you had a mom that was willing to step up and believe you. So this is
Yeah.
a powerful teaching moment, because if there were signs there, what should
Mhm.
your mom have been looking for? That maybe could have been early intervention seeds that she could have done, and also not only signs, but how could she have started to peel the layers to maybe start the process sooner
Yeah.
of having you endure this? So this is powerful right here. This is going to help a lot of people.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So, what was so beautiful about my mom is that her and I are our intuitions are very, very connected. I think a mother's connection with their children is very strong, anyways. And my mom's very aware of listening to her intuition and everything. However, back in the day, back in the 80s, if you had a gut feeling, and so my mom had a gut feeling, and she would ask me, and I would never say anything. And she would do things to kind of protect me from seeing him, or like, oh, we have plans, but she also knew that she couldn't keep me away from him. He was my father. He was paying child support. How is, through the court systems, this is such a, tedious thing you've got to deal with. So my mom went to the courts sooner than later, and she shared her suspicion that something was going on, and she wasn't feeling well about it, and so the courts had actually advised her that if you plant the seed in her head, then it's not going to hold up in court because you told her to tell you that. So my
Mm.
mom never wanted to make me believe something. She wanted me to come out and tell her. And so every time that I got to that point where I just got really distraught or really upset and like didn't want to go, it was a lot of pleading with me, and she was patient with me. And if I didn't want to go, she would always ask the questions, why don't you want to go? What is happening over there that is making you uncomfortable? Like, are you okay? And she had a feeling that it was happening, but I would not say anything. And so, and obviously she couldn't catch in the act, so it was just something that was just like, you know her hands were tied at that
Is,
point until
is
I
there
said something.
anything? Is there anything she could have done? Now looking back on it, is there anything she could have done using dolls, simulations, verbal?
She
What could have? You know what I'm trying to
I
get
think
at.
that it's up yeah, I think it's up to the kid, honestly, because it's like a lot of kids are like kind of standoffish about that. For me, I just didn't know how to put it in words. We didn't really have you know, I guess the tools to really know at that point. But when it did, and finally when I was able to come out and say, Mom, I don't like the way it makes me feel, she was like, got it. That's what I need. I needed you to tell me. And so how she got me to say it
Okay.
was, little kids are very, we trust our creators. We trust our moms and we trust our dads because they're the ones that like nurture us and they feed us, right? It's like a dog. They trust us because we feed them. So it's the same exact thing. So my mom sat me down and she had me by my little hands, and she looks at me and she goes, okay, look, it's just our secret. I pinky promise. I pinky promise I won't say anything. You tell me why you don't want to go, and I promise you don't have to go, but I promise I won't tell anyone. And I was like, "Oh, well, a pinky promise is it. Like, whenever you tell me that pinky promise, like, that pinky promise has always meant that I got the cookies. That pinky promise has always said I got the toy. That means that I got extra bath time or I got extra TV time." So she created this pinky promise of this bond of trust between her and I at a very early age. And so she had no idea what she was doing at that time, but she created a safe space for me to speak to her. And even in the later years, she even did this in high school. Like, there's a whole bunch of stories that go with this, which are really amazing. But you would think, like, I think my mom is an angel. Like, I don't know, like, she's absolutely incredible mother. And she's always had the best interest for me. And but yeah, so right then and there, I was like, okay, a pinky promise. And so I believed her, and then I told her. And then she looks at me, and I just like put my hands on her face, and I was like, okay, mommy, you said you can't say anything. And she's like, I know, but don't you think maybe you should tell Ninny, which was my grandma?
Mhm.
And she's like, because Ninny's gonna want to know, like, she's like our girl circle, like,
Right.
how we girl circle, and like we trust Ninny. And I was like, oh yeah, maybe we should tell Ninny, because she made banana pudding that night for Thanksgiving, and I really wanted to stay for it. And so she's like, well, I promise I won't tell her though, Kristi. And I was like, okay, mama. Okay, mama. And after a little while of coasting it out and everything, and I'll tell you one thing, my mom to this day has never told anyone. She's held that secret and I say secret, it did go into a lot. It did. It really did. My grandma was the one that went to the police. My grandma did all of the actions so my mom could hold that line of trust with me. And my grandma and grandpa were the ones that really stepped up to the plate and said, okay, this is our protection. This is what we have to do to protect our baby. And so it went on down to, court, and I was gonna have to testify against him. Again, like how it works when you're in the court system, as a little girl, being, a victim of this, you have your own representation, and then the parent has their own representation. So like I had my own attorney, and then my mom had her own attorney, and then my biological father had his own attorney. And so whenever and my attorney was represented with a therapist, and my therapist was just magic. I mean, she was so great. She showed me the dolls. I, reenacted. These are things we didn't know in the 80s. Like, this is not something that is like, it's very like gray in the 80s and 90s, early 90s. So yeah, so this was it kept going on and on and on. My biological father had a couple of screws loose. He was just not a really good man in the general and everything. And the biggest thing is that he was very arrogant, and still later in life still tried to like he still tries to like kind of find me and figure out where I'm at, and like, like wants to know what's going on and stuff like that. But um, my mom, did everything she could to protect us and to make sure, or to protect me and her. And so we moved around a lot, so he couldn't find us. And that was an interesting, childhood. So we were bouncing around in places and stuff, stayed with my grandparents for a little while. And then we would have a home or an apartment. And then one day, I was 7 years old. I'll never forget it. This guy starts coming around, and my mom like starts dating this man, and I'm about 7. Yeah, about 7. And he's like this big, strong man. And I mean, he was a big guy, real big guy. And I loved the way that he was to my mom. And he would come and bring me French fries and, McDonald's, and he was the coolest guy ever. And my mom had dated people prior to, but nothing like this. Like, this guy like was something different. And he was just really, really kind to me, and really, really strong, and like very military, and a lot of fun, but no BS. Like, very to the point, very regimented, military man. And next thing you know, my mom marries him. And I was 7 years old. He knew that what our troubles were and what our struggles were and where we were in our situation. And he took me in as his own, and he protected me as I was his own. And I fell in love with him. He was the best guy that, a girl could ever ask for. And he was very hard on me growing up. And he in the very beginning, like, I had my biological last name, And it was really hard to go by that biological last name because, there was so much attachment to that, and there was too much trauma that was connected to that. So he offered his last name to me or an AKA. And so we go to the court and we change my last name just like as a known as his last name. And it was so beautiful because it was like, oh wow, like this is finally the light is coming up. It's like the sun's coming up. I'm starting to be able to be a kid. I'm being able to see what it's like to not be in a single family home. I'm getting to see what it's like to have a man in my life that's not trying to hurt me. And what this feeling of protection is like all these things as a kid, like growing up. And so later I become like, he's my dad. Like, he's dad. Dad's dad. He's the best, coolest guy in the whole entire world. Like, he came in and saved my life. He protected me even when my biological father was coming in and trying to, you know, um, I wouldn't say, I'm not really sure. Basically, I would say that, yeah, he was trying to take me away from my mom. My biological father was.
Mm,
He made very many comments that he was coming after me when I was of age, and he was going to take me away from her. He's made surprise appearances in the neighborhood to see if he can get me. And I'll remember on my 13th birthday, I was in the hallway, or I was in the kitchen, or like in the house and everything, and I was walking down the hallway, and I had the old school phone, right? And
mm,
I'm bebopping through the house and everything, and I answer the phone. I'm like, "Hello," and they're like, "Hey, Kristi, happy birthday!" And I was like, "Thanks. Who is this?" And he said, "It's your daddy."
mm.
And I looked down the hall and I see my dad in the chair, and I dropped the phone. And then within seconds, my dad and my mom had me at a safe house.
Wow.
And it was no joke at all. And then my dad met biological father. And to this day, I don't know exactly what happened, but I just know that the protection was there. And it was really scary, so much of an eye opener, and a lot of trauma, right? Like, I've always felt like I was on the run and stuff like that from him and all that, but I always had my protector, and that was my dad.
It's fortunate that you had, now the new person that came in your life and he became your dad. Now, having gone through this as a child,
Yeah.
how did it show up for you? So you have the support in place, the family
Yeah.
component, you're probably going through the therapy and so forth, but how are you processing this as you're going through elementary school to junior high school? Like, what are some things that happened? Fortunately, you had a strong component now that
Yeah.
somebody stepped in and showed up for you. But how are you dealing with things now?
Um, as of right now, I feel, I'm not a victim mentality. I never have been, I never will be. I truly believe that we go through things in life, such as, molestation and, you know, and big traumatic things that happen in our life for a reason. Uh, and I truly believe that people that go through that have one of two choices. They can bottle it up and they can just, hold on to it and just like let it simmer, or you can open the bottle and allow it to help other people. And I truly feel like it's a testimony of where I've come from and what I can do with it. I'm not a victim of molestation by any means. It happened to me, sure. I overcame it, and it's not going to define me as a victim. It happened, and I can't do anything about that. But I also think that I'm more of a survivor when it comes to trauma, and that's just the beginning, right? That's just the very beginning of trauma for me. And going through high school and going through elementary school and middle school and high school and everything, I always had my dad there to support me in the decisions that I made because he knew that we were a unit. Like, it was always going to be like, if we were going to be making decisions, we were making decisions as a unit, me, my mom, and my dad.
Mm.
Um, Going through and I also had that lifeline with them, that line of trust that all started on that pinky promise. And then when I got older, my dad comes in and he brings me this thing called amnesty. I've never heard of any other parent do this, but amnesty was my lifeline to opening up to the truth. So here we are, 16, right? And like, how many kids are sneaking out of the house and like, maybe smoking pot or, like you don't know what your kids are really doing, right?
Mhm.
And so my mom and my dad would have at least every quarter, they would come in and be like, all right, Kristi, sit down. We're offering you amnesty. And so the rules of amnesty were no consequences. You have to tell and dump everything. And it doesn't matter how long it takes. It can be hours, but it all has to be done in one day. And you have to tell the truth. And there's no consequences whatsoever. No
Wow.
consequences. So I could have snuck out the night before and I could tell my mom and my dad anything and everything. And I never got in trouble. I actually was a really good kid. I didn't lie. I didn't because I had that fluidity with them. I didn't have to lie to my mom. If I wanted to skip school, I call my mom. I'm like, Mom, I don't want to be at school today because, the new season of Saved by the Bell just started and I really want to watch it. You know? Full House, the season finale's on, Mom. Like, can we be home by 6? So like I had that really great line with them on communication, but especially whenever things did go wrong or like something was going on in high school, that was a really rough one. And I will say that, as I was growing up, my dad was very strict on me. He was very strict on me. He wanted to make sure he knew who I was with. He wanted to make sure that the parents were home. He wanted to make sure that, you know, I wasn't exposed to anything that I didn't need to, but really what he was doing was protecting me from all the other things in life. And so like every time that I went anywhere, my parents would want to talk to the moms or is their dad's home, mom and dad home, like stuff like that. So um that really, was something that how they parented with me.
Mhm.
The most beautiful thing is in 1999 my dad adopted me. And that
Wow.
was a choice. And that was the most beautiful thing you can ever give a kid is their last name, is a chosen last name. Because at that moment, that's when I really truly felt like I had a dad and I had a disciplinary and I had somebody to help me grow into the person that I am today. And I'll tell you, my dad was a saving grace to our family and to me and my mom. He was our protector. He was our everything. He was a big kid. He had so much fun. He had more toys than a 5-year-old. He had, adult toys. I mean, like the man had airplanes. He had four-wheelers. He had hovercrafts. And like we didn't have a lot of money. He would just figure out ways to find these things and like store them and loved motorcycles. I've been running, on motorcycles my whole life. Been in and out of motorcycles and cars and going fast. And my mom used to race demolition derby when I was growing
Wow.
up. So I didn't have a very traditional family life. My dad raced motorcycles, raced cars. Uh, I mean, we've been doing it all my whole life. So um, whenever he adopted me, it was just like it changed my life because it was just like this is absolutely amazing that I have this opportunity to be his true daughter. And so when I did that, or whenever he did adopt me, it was like really a great feeling to know that I was a choice and that I was chosen because my biological father abandoned me. My biological father hurt me. He abused me. He caused trauma. He treated me like I was, garbage, right? He disposed of me as that. And then here comes this man that is just out of the blue and wants to be my dad and
You,
wants to take care of me. And I think that that's such a beautiful adoption itself is just absolutely gorgeous. Like it's the most shiniest part of my life ever.
it's interesting that you say that because how something as simple as taking on someone's last name by choice. And a lot of times you have, maybe the biological father isn't present and then the mother meets someone else, but then this new person that becomes dad is trying not to step on toes and
Mhm.
trying to respect that whole, lineage and so forth. But to hear that how powerful of a moment it was for you that you
Yeah.
got to take on his last name by choice, and then just how it just really almost changed the dynamics, like for
Mhm.
you.
Yeah. Yeah, it did. He was such a straight and narrow man, he knew what he wanted. He knew the moment that I came into his life that he's like, "This little girl needs a dad. This little girl needs a powerful man to help her get through this trauma." And he guided me through so many pieces of trauma and, like, taught me so much, and, I mean, he was my best friend.
Well,
My best friend.
this is another teaching moment for, for men that are not coming into a
Yeah,
relationship where there's kids and the father's not showing up and not being present, that it's okay to
yeah,
open that door to have those conversations and allow the children to have a choice. That's powerful.
yeah.
You know,
It is. It is so powerful. Go ahead.
another thing that you shared was there was a point where you decided that you weren't going to have this victim mentality anymore of being a survivor. And where did that happen? Was it in your teenage years? Was it later on adult when you started doing work? Or where did you finally come to that conclusion that no, I'm a survivor. I'm not a victim.
I think I started that at a very young age. And, like, I think even while it was happening, I never seemed as a victim. Uh, my mom's always been a mover and a shaker, and, my dad is very, coming into this, like, yeah, it was hard, like, trust me, it was hard going through as a little girl, not understanding what's happening. I'm going in and out of the court system. I'm having to figure out how to get the chicken from one end to the street to the next end of the street, having an issue and a total breakdown with the therapist, and, like, having, like, and the therapist is saying, like, "Kristi, get the chicken across the road," and I'm like, "I can't." And they're like, "Why?" And I was like, "'Cause they don't have their mommy," and it's like, "You can't do this." And it's just like, there's a lot of trauma that comes along with that. But I think that, like, the therapy that, my mom put me through, and then just the open line of communication that I had with my mom, uh, and I think my mom's way of never making me a victim.
Hmm.
It was never, "Hey," she said, "This happened. It's about how we get through it, right?"
Wow.
Like, we don't go around it, we go through it. And that's been something that she's always said to me, is that we don't go around it, we go through it. And we have to feel it, and we have to go through this, and we have to go through this trauma, but we're going to do it together because I'm not going to leave you. And know that you have a high support system, and that, we're doing the very best that we can to keep you protected. And I think that, as a child of molestation, you definitely have to go through, um, you have to have that foundation of safety, and you have to have somebody that's going to be able to hold your hand and say that, hey, it's okay, and not to be left alone by the people that you do love. And so that was a big thing. My mom never really left me alone. And she always, like, kept me very close. I was never allowed to go stay the night with friends in high school. Again, now I know why. As an adult, yes, I get that now. They don't understand that at 16 or 14. They're like, no, I want to go hang out with my friends, but it's not safe, you know. And then what happens whenever you do have the breakdown, and, like, you can't get to your parents fast enough. And so I think that my mom just had a really open mind about how she parented, and allowed me to feel whenever it was time to cry, and allowed my dad to allow my dad to come in and protect me, because I think that that's another thing. She was very, very protective of me, as, once she met my dad, but also she's meeting this man, and now she's bringing in a man into my life, and her to see and trust the fact that this man is going to be good for me, and be a disciplinary for me, and somebody that can help me be safe. And I think that that was, like, something that was really important to me too. And so whenever my dad came into the picture, he had a lot of discipline. He was very regimented, very much of a routine, and I needed that. I needed that as a parent. So, I think that just, like, the line of communication that you have with your kid, and just having an open mind, and, like, don't shut your kids down. My mom never shut me down. If I had an idea, my mom allowed me to have the idea. My mom gave me the freedom to use my voice and speak, and let me be my own individual. And my
Mhm.
dad did too. And I think that that's where I don't have that victim mentality, because I was allowed to come into my own and say, "Hey, this is who I am." and not really knowing that that's what I was doing. I just,
Right.
I'm like, well, mom, let me tell you this, dad, this happened, this. And like, it's just like letting it all out. And they're just like, yeah, cool. And don't shame your kids. Don't
No
shame your
shame.
kids if they want to color on the table and
Mm.
everything. That's artwork at that point. Like, you can paint over it.
Mm,
So
mm,
yeah, I think that that's what really hit with me as a, I'm not a, I just, victim mentalities don't get you anywhere.
mm. Let me
Really
ask you
don't.
a question. Now, your dad did this to you. How did his family respond? Did it create a break with the family dynamic? Did people take sides? And how's your relationship with them? How did that show up?
So he really didn't have family. I had a grandmother and grandfather that were very old and they had passed quite a little bit after all the stuff had actually happened. So it was very much like more on my mom's side. My mom's mom and dad, my grandma and grandpa were my protectors, my aunt and uncle, my two cousins. Like we all like, I mean, we are together. And it's even to that like that to this day. I'm still kind of like the golden child. I'm still the one that's like, um, got to make sure Kristi's okay. I got my two older cousins. They're like brothers to me. And then like my aunt and uncle are, very, very close to me as well. My grandma, my papa passed away when I was 18. And then, and I think that that's probably one of the harder things is like whenever you had been abandoned by your father, your biological father at such a young age, any man that is actually in your life is going to be important. And my papa was a very important part of my puzzle.
And it's
He
funny that
worked.
it's funny that you say that because I was going to ask you if your mom hadn't met her husband who became your dad eventually, who
Mhm.
would have been the person that would have showed up to fill that void? Because a lot of times women won't go into another relationship because of that fear. So
Right.
then now that son or daughter grows up without a male influence in their life. And,
Mhm.
it's important to have somebody step in, a
Mhm.
grandfather, an uncle, a coach, somebody that's trustworthy. So it would have been your papa, your grandfather that would have
Yeah,
stepped in to fill that.
my papa had stepped in from day one.
Mm,
He was a mechanic by trade. He actually passed away like riding four-wheelers, broke his femur
mm,
on a four-wheeler, and
wow.
that was it. So, I got some real good hero stories whenever it comes to my grandpa on that one, and he was an incredible man. He definitely like he was fun. He was again my best friend too, because I grew up so close to my family, because I was protected by them all. Like they would have like nights where it was like, all right, well, it's your turn. Let me go to sleep, and like because
Yeah.
as a little girl, you're going through these things, and it's like I can't say that I was an average little girl. I had night terrors. If I knew how to at the age of 5 or 6, and like you're seeing this little girl go through trauma and she's not speaking up, but she has these night terrors, and my mom can't understand why. And if I could have killed myself and know what suicide was at age of 5, I would have, because I didn't know how to I didn't know how to use my voice. I didn't know how to say what was happening. I didn't know what was right or wrong. You're such an infant and such a terrible, situation that you don't know how to communicate. So, whenever you have your family that sees this, they're taking it's on clockwork for me. Like aunt was coming in and staying with me, aunt and uncle, and I was staying with my mom and a lot with my mom. And then, my mom would want to have a breath. It takes a village, right, to raise kids. Like I
Mhm.
swear,
Yes.
I think a lot of moms say they got to do it all by themselves. No, you don't. No, you don't. Girl, get to sleep. Dads too, your dads are taking care of their babies, and single fathers and stuff. Like you need help. It takes a village. And I think that that's one thing is like lean on your family, lean on your support system, because you know, as I've gotten older, I'm 39 now. I don't have children. I'm a business owner. I own a couple of different businesses in real estate and here in Dallas. And my dad taught me how to stand on my own 2 feet. And he always told me, he's like, don't you ever rely on a man. You take care of yourself. Don't you ever rely on a man whatsoever. Cause that just don't do it. And I said, okay, daddy, I won't. So my dad was a military man. He was in the Air Force and he was in the Army. He was a jet engine mechanic. He was a hydraulics engineer on oil rigs. He was, he used to work for NASA. My dad's jack of all trades, and my dad, back in 2000, I think 15, whenever Hurricane Harvey came through Texas, my mom and dad decided that they were going to move to Missouri,
Wow.
and they were leaving Texas, and they were going to move to Missouri because my dad also had a daughter, and his daughter lived in Missouri as well. I didn't actually become close to his daughter until I was 27 years old. And I had such a hard time as a kid with her. I had met her when I was younger, and she kept calling him by his real name instead of dad. And that just made me so mad because this is your real dad. He wants to be here. Why are you calling him by his real name whenever I have been praying for a dad because mine threw me in the trash, say, and now this man, this wonderful man is here and he's your real dad. You should be happy that you can call him dad. Cause I'm like begging to call him dad. I'm begging to have his last name. And so her and I got into a big, like not even joking, we got into a fist fight and I grabbed her hair and pushed her into the dirt and beat her up. And, it was a good match. It was a real good match. And she never came back. She never came back to Texas. And so my dad would have to go back to Missouri and everything, but we never told our parents about it.
Really?
We never told our parents about the fight because we didn't want to get in trouble. And so,
Not even during amnesty?
no way. No way. That was too close. That was one I was taken to the grave. We actually told my dad. We told my dad and my mom in 2020,
Wow.
and that's whenever the secret came out between her and I, which it was something that we got to hold on to. And now I would say my sister's my best friend. My sister is she's the light to my life, that's for sure. And we have a lot of time to make up. And in 2021. My sister has two kids, my niece and nephew, Camden and Riley, and I take them as my own. But in 2021, my dad was on his way to the airport to do an annual because my dad decided that he wanted to get off the rig and he wanted to be a jet engine mechanic on private planes. So he was doing like A&P work for annuals for like little kit planes. And he was on his motorcycle on his way to the airport at 8 a.m. and a drunk driver hit him on his motorcycle and he drug him 25 feet into a driveway. And my dad lived for 11 days and died on August 10th. So that right there is enough trauma to put you over the edge. That's for sure. To have your protector completely taken away from you. And to know that life is so fragile. To know that it's so important to have a relationship with your kids and to tell them that you love them and to even those arguments, the family arguments that everybody sits in there like, oh, I don't want to do Christmas. I don't want to do Thanksgiving because, too much drama. I would take anything to have that. I would take anything to have my dad back in my life, to have that moment, to just have him tell me, hey, kid, you're doing great.
Mm-hmm.
It was the 11th day and he was in the hospital and I sat there and I talked to him and he's, unconscious, obviously. And I was like, all right, Dad, you're the man. You make the decisions. You tell us what you want to do. Now, you got one of two choices, as you have told us growing up. You're going to get through this and we're going to go through it. And it's going to be a long healing process as long as you know you're coming back to 100% you. Or you go dance with the man. because it's not our choice. And about 3 hours later, he decided that he wanted to go dance with the man.
Mm.
And I'm so grateful that you have this podcast, and because if anybody could hear this story of knowing that the man that protected me from being molested again, the man that protected me from all the boys trying to break my heart in, 16, or just to have that man guidance, or just the hug, that piece of protection that a little girl needs from their dad. Your mom and your dad are your creators. They're the one that gave you life. They were the ones that gave you air. So that's why we hold them up on this pedestal of, I know that you're just an older version of me whenever you have kids and
Mm.
you still don't know what the heck you're doing. But just to know that that man stood up and said, "No, this is my kid. I'm going to give her a life. I'm going to choose her to be my daughter. And I'm going to father her the best that I possibly can," is the best gift a kid could ever ask for. Christmas doesn't compare to this.
Is there, you know, having this trauma as a child and then, not having that victim mentality and then having this strong man that came in and protected you, is there anything you're doing to give back to help other survivors that are struggling or
Um, I I'm not afraid of my testimony. I try to share my testimony as much as I can because this is who I am. These weren't done to me. They were done for me at some point. I'm not a victim. Again, yeah, my dad was killed by a drunk driver. My biological father molested me. I've lived a really great life. Had really great parents. I've had a really great, strong support system. And I must be just too dang stubborn to allow the mentality to come in. I don't know. I mean, like, I don't see how some people go through this stuff and just fold, but my dad didn't. My dad has always taught me I never raised a lamb.
you
You're
know
the wolf. So,
what would be a song that reminds you of your dad? What song comes on that just oh
mm. Carry on my wayward son
mm, it's a beautiful
by
song.
Kansas. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful song.
When he was in the hospital, uh I think, kind of spirituality and, religion and all these things can come into play on some of these things. But I remember I was walking from the hotel to because I stayed at the hotel right next to the hospital whenever
Mm,
he was in the hospital, and I happened to be walking, and there was like a Starbucks like right there that you'd walk through and everything, and I would happen to be walking. It's like doors open at 9 o'clock, 9 a.m. And I was there at 8:59 every single morning and getting yelled at by the nurses saying, "Kristi, we said 9 o'clock." And I said, and I was walking through and I just happened to like look down and there was a guitar pick. There's a guitar pick on the ground. When was the last time you found a guitar pick on the ground? Have you ever? It's not
no.
often, right? So my dad played at it. My dad never played. My daddy played at it. As a and I found this guitar pick, which hold on to
Wow.
my guitar pick often. And I find them all over the place. And then all of a sudden, like I have my phone in my back pocket, and next thing I know, "Carry On My Wayward Son" is just turned on my phone. I'm not
Wow.
jamming to dad tunes. I'm not nothing. I'm just purely just trying to get to the hospital. And at that point, it went from a walk to a run, and
Wow.
it's now 8:50, and they're banging on the doors saying, "Let me in, let me in, let me in." And they're like, "It's not time." And I'm like, "I don't care. Let me in." I'm pushing the doors open as much as I can. They unlock it to come out, and I push past the nurse and I turn the phone on as loud as it could. And I'm like telling his nurse, I'm like, "Wake him up. He needs to wake up." And so they take him, try to pull him off with propofol to get him to wake up. And that was just like the time, it's like, like he made his choice, like he knows
Mm.
what he wants to do. And so we were lucky enough to be able to be with him on his last breath. And the wildest thing is like I'm more close to my dad now than I am before he was alive. Like I talk to him, I find, it's just like a whole nother relationship. And I would love to do more. I want to do more. I want to speak more about my dad. My dad was the man. I mean, he was the legend. The man was awesome. He was
Mm.
so much fun. The funniest, lighthearted man that you could imagine. Always in a good mood. Always in a good mood. Never was in a bad mood. No negative talk. I mean, always empowering. Always telling me, he's like, "Well, if you want to do it, then go do it.
Mhm.
What's going to stop you?" And I think that that's why I just keep doing what I do. Like I just hear him in the back of my head say, "Well, what's going to stop you? Keep going."
And that's a powerful testament. And you know what? I do want to find out a little bit more about what you're doing, your entrepreneurship and so forth, to just know that you didn't have that victim mentality. You stepped into your power. And how did that show up in your life? Now you're an entrepreneur, you have different businesses. So I
Yeah.
want you to share with the audience, like how you, that resilience from trauma and pain and hurt to now
Yeah.
what you've done with your life.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that. So I always had a problem waking up early. I mean, I've had like 35 jobs. And my daddy's always told me, he's like, "God, Kristi, I swear, you can't wake up early to save your life." And I was like, "I know, Dad, it's a real problem." And I've been fired because I can't ever get on time and everything. It's just a thing, it's a habit, it's something it's been a thing my whole life. So, we all struggled on the idea of, like, me having a job, and, I just happened to fall into doing, luxury apartment locating, right after college. And I fell in love with it. I thought it was awesome. I'm a licensed realtor. I love people. I love the hustle. I love, houses. I love like beautiful things and everything. And so I happened to really get into it. And then like 2 years after that, like I started my first business as a luxury apartment consultant and here in Dallas. And so we help people, buy real estate and luxury high rises and penthouses. And we also, help them can go from renting into purchasing their luxury homes. And so, after once I realized that I couldn't wake up on time and I could actually work at 10 a.m. and work all night, then this actually aligned perfectly for me. And so it's just kind of like filtered down into different, categories of things and building my business out to be even more than, just me as an independent. I have a team of 35 luxury specialists that are all licensed realtors that work in Texas, Tampa, and in Chicago. And we're looking to expand into different cities now. And it's just like, I never really had a goal in mind. I just said, I just wonder how much I could do. There's no cap, there's no ceiling, and, like, I will just go until I get tired. And, yeah, I get tired for sure. I definitely say that, like, after my dad passing, and going through the court and, like, dealing with all that, like, again, you kinda, like, lose a little gas, and because you always are all gas, no brakes, but you learn to start taking care of yourself. You start learning to take that 5 minutes to yourself and, like, just breathing. You start, meditating and praying, and you start drinking more water and holding on to those wins because those wins are, like, the most important. And I think one of my biggest lessons that I've taken away, especially being an entrepreneur and, starting my own business and going through the trauma that I have been so, blessed to have.
Mm.
is we don't have a choice.
Mm.
We don't have a choice until you have a choice. And I had that conversation with my dad, and I said, Dad, you do get the choice because you got the light on one side and then you got us on the other. And so you get that choice today, and you get to make that decision on where you want to go and what you want to do. But with us, we don't. We have the selfish act, right? But that's not an option. So I just remember going through so much depression and so much sadness and, struggling with being an entrepreneur and acting out and trying to find anything that I could find to make me feel happy. And so I buried myself into work is really what it was. And I remember waking up every morning saying, I'm in my nightmare again. Or is this reality or is this nightmare? Like, what is this? Where am I? And then finally one day I sat down and I said, you know what, Kristi, you only have one choice because the other choice doesn't sound so great.
Mm.
And you can choose to have a really good day,
Mm.
or you can choose to stay in this misery that you wake up to every single day because it's the last feeling you had attached to your dad. And that's why you're holding on to it. And every day you think, okay, well, that's the last feeling I had when I had with my dad. So I'm going to stay there because it's familiar. But is that really where I want to be? Do I like this feeling? And I don't like this feeling. So I finally realized I was like, you know what? I want to wake up and I want it to be done. I want it done. I want to feel good. I want to wake up and I want to say, you know what? Today's a new day.
Mm.
And I found his Post-it note that my dad wrote my mom, and he said, tomorrow is a new day.
Wow.
And it is. And so every morning I wake up and I say, hey, Kristi, what do you need today? What do you need? Not what does everybody else in the company need? What do you need?
Mm.
So I give myself options in the morning and I say, okay, I have the option to eat. I have the option to work out, journal, meditate. Which one do you want?
Mm.
And so I ask myself that, and I'll start to, if I start with my journal, I start with my gratitude. Starting my morning with being grateful for what it is. I start looking at the most beautiful details of every single moment of the things that I look at. I stop during the middle of my day to appreciate what is around me and do a self check-in. And this is how I can continue to be successful because I take care of me first so I can give back to others.
Mm.
And I think that that's a big lesson for mom and dads. Because if you're not taking that 5-10 minutes of grounding, how can you show up for your kids?
Absolutely.
How can you show up for your parents? How can you show up for your work? And giving yourself options and like allowing yourself to have the freedom to take that 10 minutes in the morning or, even that 30-minute, long bath. Do it.
Mm.
Ground yourself, let your mind quiet, take the deep breaths and read a book. Anything that brings into happiness. But I think that like that's what holds longevity and stability that a lot of parents are looking for. Cause I can only imagine what it's like to um have kids right now. I'm considering like kids next year
Mm.
and I'm like, oh my gosh, like how am I gonna have patience for this? Barely have patience for 30 agents. They drive me crazy. I have 30 minutes to sit here all day and like, have my meditation and my air. But if I didn't have that, like, how am I going to be able to function? And I think that, you know, I, I can't say that I'm a parent, but I can only imagine like if my mom had to have done that. My mom had to have done that. My mom's a superhero. My dad was a superhero. Like the book together, those two were like the Incredibles. Like it's insane. I had incredible parents. Incredible parents. I've had an amazing family. And I think that like just because you think that, you don't have a family to lean on, your friends can be that too. And you find value in those people.
Wow, this has been powerful. As we start to wrap up today's podcast, I want to get your permission to do two things.
Yeah.
One is I want to take your story of the pinky promise and I want to maybe craft it into something like a short story, and then just put something out there like a best practice as a summary, the pinky promise where parents can start to use when they
Yeah.
feel that maybe their children are there may be suspicions of molestation. I really want to turn this into something that parents can have as a tool and a resource.
Yeah,
And then the
absolutely.
second thing is the amnesty. It's just that's such a beautiful concept to have this safe space, whether it's once a quarter or once a
Yeah.
year, where they can just go ahead and take that and implement these tools. Because as parents, one is pride and ego that gets in the way of not wanting to seek out help even when we're struggling, but being able to have these resources and tools, I think, can just be incredible to just um, offer them a cachet of different things to help on their journey to parenthood. And I think these two are, when I asked you, what is something that could have helped a child that was struggling with this, molestation, I think that pinky promise right there, I think that's a powerful, powerful tool to be able to incorporate um, into parenting. So if you're okay with that, I would definitely like to turn that into something. And
Absolutely. And I think it doesn't have to like stick just to molestation. I think that there's a lot of things in life, especially with the kids that are going through bullying now and like they're going through like different scenarios in school or they're having problems
Mm,
with their friends. I feel like the mental space that you can provide for your kids, for with the Pinky Promise can offer so much more than just like a big, massive secret of
you're right.
molestation.
You're
I
right.
feel like the technique of using the Pinky Promise is something that it sounds so small, but if you start in the very beginning of just pulling it into practice of a brand new baby, of just saying, at the age of 2, like, "I pinky promise I'll give you a cookie if you open the door." "I pinky promise." So it's like but you have to deliver to that. You can't make a promise and break it, because if you break it, you're breaking the bond. You're breaking the trust, because eventually you're gonna need to use your amnesty card. And you're
Absolutely.
gonna have to sit down with your 16-year-old and say, "Hey, all right, look, I didn't know what's going on," right? Because we need to be present into our kids, especially at that age. You don't even know, like, if they're, what they're doing. You don't know what they're doing in third. I'm just like, "What is happening?" Like, "Just tell me." But if I have a reaction, it's gonna be based on the parent's reaction if they're gonna tell you. So if you sit down and say, "Hey, look, no consequences. No consequences whatsoever." And that's the same thing with the pinky promise. There's no consequences with the pinky promise. It's a secret. And if there is something and mom and dad have to make, you know, a decision on protecting them, then you try to bring that secret in with somebody else, grandma, um, auntie, uncle, somebody that also is a safe space for the little one to be able to provide information.
Wow. Thank you so much. This was so powerful. So, what are your final closing words as we bring this to a wrap?
Well, as far as like parents go, love your parents. I know that each and every one of us have a parent, and somewhere or someone that we would call our parent. That might be a grandma or adopted family, somebody that's been that creator for you, and enjoy the moment, enjoy the arguments, enjoy the chaos whenever it's just healthy chaos. When you think it's like, well, they said this and they said that, and we're torn between this and we're torn between that. Because it could be gone. It could be taken away from you so fast. And, like, me and my dad had plans. We had so many plans, and now he's gone. So, I guess my life is too short to hold grudges, and if you haven't talked to your family in a really long time, probably should. You might not agree with them, but at least you know that they're there and that you can say what you need to say, and I hope that this podcast could really help somebody break that cycle of avoidance and break that cycle of not speaking to your parents. And doesn't mean you have to have a relationship with them, but speak your truth.
You know, I struggled to hold back this question because I just have to ask it. just because
Yeah.
I feel like I'm gonna regret it if I don't. With all the trauma and pain that your father caused, because he's not your dad, he was just a father, a
Right.
biological. Have you forgiven him?
Absolutely. I've forgiven him. He made his decisions. Every action has a consequence. His consequence is he lost his daughter.
Mm.
And I gained the biggest prize possession for what he did. And I appreciate it. I got my dad. I got my dad because of what he did. My dad changed my life. My dad is my creator. I've even forgiven the man that has killed my dad.
Thank you so much, Kristi, for being to be on. Wow, just with that, another episode of Fatherhood Voices, and from trauma and pain to a story of resilience and success, and taking away not being a victim, but just being a survivor. And thank you so much for your story. This is going to help so many people, and especially with the Pinky Promise and Amnesty. I can just see this being a breakthrough for a lot of families.
I
Thank you
hope
so
so.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me and
Absolutely.
listening.
Wow. It's been a beautiful story. Thank you for
Keep
sharing.
inspiring.
Thank you.
Bye, Edward.
Bye bye. I'll share a funny story. This isn't going to be on there, but
Yeah.
my I was a narcissist father, very emotionally and physically and verbally abusive of my kids. But it was always I had three daughters, so my thing was I never wanted them to depend on a man. They had to go to college. It was success, and it was just because coming from their entrepreneurship and then real estate and corporate America, it was always just about success, never being dependent. And because of that, I gave them PTSD and broke them to the point where they all three of them tried to kill themselves by the time they were 16. And I was so in my masculine that it's like, no, you know what? Go ahead and do it. Like I didn't raise weak girls. And so it wasn't until my journey with plant medicine that I finally had this awakening. And then from that, started the process of healing. We're a family that's healing. We're still on this path 4 years later. And, but with that, last year in ceremony is when I had this awakening where I've struggled to find my purpose. And it finally revealed itself. It says, you were brought here to help heal the relationship between fathers and their children. And then Fatherhood Voices came to fruition. And it's through my story of just being able to not be embarrassed and be ashamed, but sharing my story and then bringing on other masculine men that have really fucked things up with their kids and just showing them like you only have a short period of time and you have the ability to make things right, before it's too late. And that's where Fatherhood Voices has come from. And then now bringing on the stories of, yes, we're getting the stories from the fathers, but it's also about bringing on the children to share their story of the impacts of how fathers didn't show up or the trauma that they caused. And this is how we're going to help heal not only fathers that don't even know they need healing because they're still stuck, but also to give children a voice to be able to share their story and get these best practices that are going to help shorten the learning curve of healing. So, fuck, I think this is going to be in the fucking podcast as much as I was like it was over. Jesus Christ. Oh, fuck. They even say that in a podcast without getting mad. Wow. So
Like I
that's the
just
story. And your story and other people's stories is going to help to heal one family at a time, one child at a time.
I just love that you sat with plant medicine because it changed my life too. And it's like it's so nice to like share that and like to be able to speak about that so honestly and to know that plant medicine is such a gift
Yes.
and the delivery that it gives and like what you can receive from the medicine and I think that that's like really what gave my breakthrough too with my dad and having that relationship and to be able to burn off the anger and the hate and the trauma, that the reactions of the trauma and grief that I had gone through, and for you to be able to, like, have that big breakthrough
Mm.
and, like, you're making a wave, like a tidal wave with something like this. And for you to, like, come out and say, own up to your faults and say, "No, I
Mm.
wanna be different. I wanna help. I wanna inspire." It's just, like, it's beautiful. Like, Edward, like, this is huge.
No, thank you. So I think we're going to keep this in here if that's okay, because
Yeah,
this moment
absolutely.
was powerful. And Christian, I'm going to have you shut this off before I do some more cussing to get more emotional. 'Cause I don't know how to shut it off. But thank you so much. This was beautiful. This was beautiful.
Absolutely. Thank you
And
for
I'm going to go take the pinky promise, and I'm going to have the team turn it into something that's going to be beautiful to help people, and the amnesty. Such beautiful
love
tools.
I
Beautiful
love it.
tools. So thank you so much.